sort of democratization of energy that happens when you go to clean technology, because you can't put a coal power plant on your house, but you can put solar, and you can get an electric vehicle. So there are these choices where you get to vote, right? Essentially by how you live and what you buy. And I think we got to shine a light on the good options that are out there.
Thanks for joining us tonight. It's great to see this overflow crowd here to talk about energy, when just a few blocks away we have Pat Sajak and Joe Moore doing a play, but you chose to be here, so that's fantastic. And I appreciate that it's the AC hotel. It's pretty hot out. All right, I want to get started here. My name is Jeff Nicolina. I'm the Executive Director of Climate Hawaii. We are proud to sponsor this event tonight, along with a host of others. And I just want to make sure I get this right. AC Hotel Honolulu, the Hawaii State Energy Office, the Scholars Strategy Network, Ulupono Initiative, I saw Murray here, and then the Better Speaker Series, which is a product of University of Hawaii Manoa, the Learning Coalition, Robert, the Hawaii Community Foundation, and this particular series is also sponsored by the School of Ocean, Earth Science, and Technology, and I saw Dean Chip Fletcher here. We're going to talk for a minute about the Better Tomorrow Speaker Series, which is an initiative of the University of Hawaii, but it's led by Robert Ferguson and this team, and it's just a fantastic guest. Fantastic initiative. Robert brings in big thinkers, scholars, academics, thought leaders from around the globe to Hawaii to tackle and talk about these challenging issues in sort of this salon-like environment. And that's what we're going to have tonight with our speaker, chair of the California Climate Commission, David Hochschild. But what that leads to is talking about these ideas, trying to overcome these big challenges, and hopefully planting some seeds that take root here in the islands. So I will get to David in a second, but before I do so, Robert asked if I could provide some context and color on the conversations tonight. So if you'll indulge me for just a second. To say that we're at a critical juncture in our clean energy future, our journey to 100% is really an understatement. And it really the solutions are going to come up from working together. And this is why the relationship between Hawaii and California is so special. And sort of let me explain why. As I see it, Hawaii is this place where we can innovate solutions that then scale in California, where they have that ability to make big things move and move the market. We're tiny here in the islands, we know that. And often we'll hear from naysayers that say, does it make a difference in Hawaii? I mean, if we fully decarbonize our economy, is it gonna make one bit of difference for climate on Earth? And if you look at the physics, they're right, it's not. But you really have a deficiency of imagination of thinking the outsized influence that these small islands can have in really driving change elsewhere. And the clearest example of that is something that happened a decade ago when Hawaii adopted the first 100% renewable energy law in the nation, thanks to Senator Chris Lee, who's here tonight. And many others. And then California dragged their heels for a few years. And 3 years later, California adopted that very, very similar law. And since then, some 20 states have essentially set an expiration date on fossil fuel. And now most of the US population lives in a jurisdiction where there's 100% renewable energy or clean energy law of some sort. So I think that really typifies what we can do in Hawaii in terms of being a vanguard and driving that change. But we can't scale it, and that's where California comes in. We're going to hear from the speakers tonight about so many examples of how they're taking our clean energy revolution and just blowing it up and supersizing it in so many ways. California, by some measures, is essentially the fourth largest economy on Earth, and they have the ability to move markets. They are, I saw McKenna Kaufman here, Professor Kaufman, I might get this wrong, they're a market maker, right? So when they do something or say something, it ships the market. Hawaii can't do that. When California says we're going to phase out gasoline-powered cars, automakers are essentially like, I guess we're not making cars anymore, or gas cars anymore. something like that. Hawaii can't do that. You know, when the solar company says this is the price for a utility scale project, we just say, I guess that's the price. But California can really move and shift markets, and that's that power that comes from scaling. That's something Hawaii can't do. But what Hawaii can do is utilize our size and the challenges that we face to be that ender. We're going to hit those challenges first in Hawaii because of our small size. Our islands aren't connected, so if we want to add more renewable energy, you know, we're going to need storage. We're going to need to figure out how to balance the system quicker, and we've done that. You know, I think of adding rooftop solar, you know, where we lead the nation in per capita rooftop installations. That was a big challenge because it was tough to integrate, you know, tens of thousands of individual power plants onto the grid. But thanks to leadership from the solar industry, I see Isaac Orwake here working with the utility. They really worked with the industry to figure out how to interconnect all the systems, and a lot of those standards then got adopted elsewhere. On the small island of Kauai, they had to figure out how to run this island grid using mostly solar and keeping the inertia going. So they were one of the first to develop a synchronous condenser using an old power plant essentially as a flywheel. And then equity is such a critical value that we share. You know, Hawaii was one of the first to develop this green bank that provides on-bill financing to, you know, essentially drive down the cost of electricity for thousands of local families that are, you know, lower moderate income. Hawaii hit those obstacles really first, and we innovated. But then it's going to take scale to really move the needle and do what we have to do for climate. And no one knows that better than Chair David Hochschild. So David's going to be sharing a little bit of an update from his vantage on what California is doing, what's working, what the challenges are, where they're heading. After David shares a bit, we're going to have a moderated Q&A led by none other than best in the biz, Kelly Simek. You may know her from Living 808. You might have seen her last week for 11 hours during the tsunami scare at the desk without a commercial break. Or you might know her as my co-host on Empowered Hawaii, the monthly show on positive solutions for Hawaii's sustainable future, which you all welcome to go home and binge tonight online. But on to our speaker. He's been standing here patiently for a while. David Hochschild, his career years span public service, environmental advocacy, and work in the private sector in Silicon Valley. Now, I first met David about, I don't want to say when, a while back. He was working as a special advisor to Willie Brown, the mayor of San Francisco, and had an innovative idea to try to bring solar onto public buildings using a time-tested tool, municipal bonds. They did some 100 million in solar bonds to bring solar on those buildings. We thought it was a great idea. We did an event at the Art Auditorium at UH, shared that idea. We didn't quite get it off the ground here, but from there you went on to found the Boat Solar Initiative, which had some 100,000 members nationwide with Adam Browning. Then you worked in the private sector in Silicon Valley, leading solar group, worked at the PUC in California, and then went to the California Energy Commission. Over that time, he's been awarded the Sierra Club's Trailblazer Award, the American Lung Association's Clean Air Hero Award, and the U.S. Department of Energy's Million Solar Roof True Champion Award. And then last year, you were named American Energy Society's Person of the Year. That's where you go. Awesome. David leads the clean energy transition with a team of some 700 plus in what is really the world's fourth largest economy. You've helped California scale solar and base storage and keep your eyes and horizons despite shifting winds in DC. And really, you're David's the kind of guy who makes you feel like clean energy isn't just possible, it's inevitable. That this genie is not going back in the bottle. You have so much love from our side. David's a big thinker, solutions-oriented leader, and we're super fortunate to have him joining us tonight. So with that, I turn it over to you, David Hochschild.
Welcome, friends. I'm David Hochschild with the California Energy Commission. Thank you, Jeff, for that generous eulogy. Good to be here. I wanted to just first note that it is the 2-year anniversary of the Lahaina fires, and this is something that our two states have shared. And our hearts went out to you, when those fires happened, and you know, we felt all your love and support when we were going through our fires. You know, at my hometown in Berkeley, California, we had a day once when the smoke from the fire was so thick that it was dark as night. In the middle of the day, the street lights came on at noon. And you know, we got sick, my wife, my kids, and we had to leave the Bay Area. Never have we had wildfire smoke in the Bay Area. And so this is because of climate. And so this is the challenge of our time, the challenge of our generation. But there is a lot we can do. And so I want to invite all of us to kind of enter this conversation together tonight with an expansive sense of possibility about what we can create. There's huge powers at the state level. Actually, most of the power is at the state and local level when we talked about solutions. While she's doing that, I heard a quote last year that really stuck with me that I wanted to share and kick it off, which is sometimes in life, you know, the moments that we feel most powerless, we're actually most powerful. And I think we're in one of those moments right now. What's happening from the White House to our country right now is egregious, and it can be demoralizing. But I think we have a chance now to kind of set an intention for how we're going to get through it and come back even stronger. So I want to begin with that. So, 2 states, 1 goal. You know, we're bonded in many ways. I want to just begin by asking all of you in Hawaii to please take pride in what your state has done on climate. It's momentous. You don't have to be a big state to make a big difference. You were the first state in the US to adopt the 100% clean energy law. We were second, and now almost half the states in the country have that. We were the first state to adopt carbon neutrality law. We were second, and now that's underway. So let's draw on the inspiration of those accomplishments to be even bolder now. So I also wanted, before we begin, just to acknowledge my rock, my amazing wife, Cynthia Lee, who's right here. Who are with us as well. They're both in their 80s, and we're so blessed that you can join us for this trip. And one thing, our kids are in Chinese school in the area, and I was always struck by this word in Chinese. The word for crisis is wei qi, which is just made of 2 other words, danger and opportunity. So that's what the word crisis is, just danger and opportunity. There's always opportunity. Whoops, did this go out? There we go. Many crises, many opportunities. There's always opportunity inside the crisis. And that is true of the climate crisis itself, because actually inside this huge challenge is, I think, the chance to create something beautiful and powerful and durable in the form of a clean energy economy. So that's what I want to walk through tonight. So beginning with California, a little bit of our story. We're focused intensely on cleaning up the electric grid. And last week we announced that the state of California has reached 67% clean electricity on our grid. We're in 2/3. What's important about this milestone, first of all, alternative energy is the wrong word to use to describe renewables. Fossil is alternative on the grid today. And what's important about this milestone, this was considered mythology that this would even be possible, even like 8 or 10 years ago, okay? So we're here, and actually this data is already a little bit outdated, so where we're actually at now in California is about 70%, right? So this has happened in a very short order. Our current law, signed by Governor Newsom, requires us to get to 90% by 2035. We're absolutely on path to do that, then 100% by 2045. Because of the market transition that has occurred in clean energy, led by all of our states acting together, the cost of renewables has gone down. So now, last year in the US, 96% of the capacity additions on the grid in the US were from clean energy. 96% of the retirements, by the way, were from fossil. So the grid is getting cleaner actually in every state. And one of the biggest stories is the story of coal. If you recall, when Trump first ran for office, in 2016, he campaigned on coal, right? Well, actually, more coal got retired under Trump than under Obama because, you know, solar and wind are cheaper. And so we went from more than half of the electricity in the U.S. coming from coal to now 16% in solar. Another one of my favorite proverbs, the people who say it can't be done should get out of the way of people who are doing it. I want to just give you sort of a tour of where some of this clean electricity is coming from and tell you a few stories. This is the world's largest thin film solar PV project. This was commissioned probably 8 years ago or so. It's in Riverside County in California. Just over the course of construction, okay, on this single project, all of this innovation occurred. Hey, Dave, would you mind drinking the water? And that's not vodka there. Okay. All this innovation happens over the course of the construction. So originally with these large-scale projects, they had to grade the sites. Okay, that actually costs a lot. It's more damage to the environment. They figured out actually at this point how to just vibrate the steel post, so much lower impact. The panels themselves had, for this field right here, half of them had an aluminum frame. They figured out halfway through the installation how to eliminate the aluminum frame. Cost savings there. And the efficiency of the panels wasn't high enough to justify the added cost of doing a tracker. When you track the sun, you generate about 25% more power. So after this project, basically all of the efficiency got up, so everything's tracking. We're also home to the world's largest geothermal power plant. This is in Lake County and Napa County, about an hour and a half north of San Francisco. It's about 1 gigawatt in size. So enough to power like a city like San Francisco. We had the world's largest wind project. It's now the world's third largest. We love losing these records. It means that someone else is stepping up. This is in Kern County. And you know, it's interesting, if you talk to people in California and you ask, what do you think about Kern County? Oil, right? People associate Kern County with oil because it's where the oil production is. But actually, wind is the second largest taxpayer in Kern County. We're home as well to the world's largest solar rooftop. This is the Apple headquarters in Cupertino, 17 megawatt solar roof. This is an interesting building. It's actually the largest curved sheets of glass in the world. I had major building envy when I went into this place. They fill the middle, which is so big you can take the whole 49ers football stadium and fit it in the middle of this donut hole. It's all full of fruit trees, so pears and plums and apples and so forth for the employees. We're home as well to the world's largest battery storage project. This is also in Kern County. And this is a record that we're breaking again in California because about 6 weeks ago, we just grouped an even biggest world's largest battery project, $5 billion, the Darden project. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. We're leaning very, very heavily, and I think very successfully, into energy storage as a major solution for the grid. We're also going upstream. If you think about lithium, really sort of, I think like the oil of the clean energy future, we have a huge reserve of lithium in California, enough to power 375 million electric vehicles. Most of the lithium in your phones, your EVs, your laptop computers, most of the lithium today comes from just 4 countries. So it's Chile and Argentina, where it's mined through these large evaporation plants, and it's Australia and China, where it's hard rock mining. The lithium in California is in a superheated brine that's about 1.5 miles below the surface, and it's the greenest way to produce lithium in the world. Very small footprint because we have about a dozen geothermal power plants that operate, and you cycle the brine, you withdraw the lithium, and then the brine goes back down and gets recharged into the reservoir. So to produce 20,000 tons of lithium, if you do it from an evaporation pond in South America, you impact 30,000 acres. You do it from hard rock mining in Australia and China, you impact 3,000 acres. From Lithium Valley in California, 30 acres. So very small footprint, and it's 100% powered by clean geothermal electricity. One thing that I think is really exciting about what's happening in renewable energy today, these industries, solar and wind and so forth, are scaling at rates much, much faster than the energy industries that preceded them, like coal and gas and nuclear. And that's because the cost is also falling at rates much, much faster. I was in the solar industry when I met Jeff about 25 pounds ago. That was back in 2000. You know, solar panels are about $5 a watt, okay? I was involved with a project last week, you know, they're getting solar panels today at 16 cents a watt. So just incredible cost reductions. And you know, this is kind of one of the great case studies of clean energy. So in 2004, it took a year to build 1 gigawatt of solar. In 2010, it took a month to build a gigawatt of solar globally. In 2016, it took a week. In 2023, it took a day to build a gigawatt of solar. In 2024, last year, half a day. And today, that's one round of applause, right? There we are. Actually, today, solar panels is the single largest investment on the world's electric grid. It's in excess of $500 billion a year. And we're actually just getting started. We're just getting started. That's what's exciting. There's actually a lot more cost reduction, a lot more scale to come. So kind of married to that is energy storage. And so we're leaning in really heavily on this. And this is kind of one really exciting deployment story. You know, just since Gavin Newsom became governor, which was 6.5 years ago, we put in 16 gigawatts of energy storage. So I want to just put that in context. The entire history of California, we only have 100 gigawatts total, right? So 16 is already from energy storage, and it's going in very fast. And the fleet is performing very, very successfully, the storage fleet. Last summer, we had the highest temperatures in the history of the state of California, and the highest energy demand in the history of the state of California. No outages and no flex alerts even, and storage gave us that cushion. Along with that, we're deploying a huge amount of clean energy, so storage and renewables combined over 27 gigawatts just since Newsom became governor, and that's allowed something extraordinary to happen. This has never happened in the history of the state or in the history of any economy our size, which is we're hitting clean energy on the grid in California on 93% of the days so far in 2025, okay? For a period between like 1 hour to 7 hours. Every single day we're hitting it, and that has never happened for any economy this big. And again, this is stuff people said was impossible. So we're not going to stop. We're not going to stop until we get to 100% clean energy, 100% of the hours of the day for 100% of the people. Okay. We also created the largest virtual power plant in the world. We have a gigawatt enrolled. We did a test with a portion of that. Walker, what was the results of that test?
535.
Yeah, so we just did dispatch that.
Yeah, 9 p.m.
Yeah, so incredible, clean, you know, behind the meter, customer owned storage, dispatching. So I want to talk a little bit about reducing impacts. There are impacts from renewables. There's impacts from every form of energy generation. But there's a hopeful story there as well. With wind in California, the early turbines were installed with a lattice structure, which actually was sort of perching opportunity for birds, and very, very high RPM, about 45 rotations per minute. We've been doing repowers all over the state. This one project is a good example of that. It's called Vasco, and we had 432 of these older turbines. We replaced them with just 34 of the new turbines, which have a much slower RPM, about 12 RPM, much more powerful. We tripled the energy production, and we cut avian mortality by 70%. So a good story of impact reduction. We're also leaning into offshore wind. So we have now 5 sites leased off the California coast. They're 20 miles offshore, 583 square miles, and this is for floating offshore wind. And so these are massive turbines. One rotation of the turbine can power 2 houses for a day. And they're tethered to the seafloor by 3 high-tension cables. Okay? Going back to the sort of opportunity inside the crisis, in the middle of COVID, in the middle of the worst wildfire season, we had the governor take an incredibly bold stance. He signed this executive order, the first in the country to create a mandate for 100% zero-emission vehicles by 2035 for all new vehicle sales. And what is, yes, it's also again, this was not, a lot of people, you know, said this is never going to happen. Well, what's going on now that gives me a lot of hope is that you're seeing the median range of the new EVs is going up every year. So right now, I think we're at 283 miles is the median range for the new EVs coming to market. And we're deploying more EV charging than ever before at larger and larger sites. So this one from Tesla, 98 installs. The one here on the right is in San Francisco. It's a great story. It used to be a shop to go get your oil changed, and now it's fast charging. We actually have more electric vehicle charge plugs in California than we have gasoline on. We just dedicated about 3 months ago the largest port-based truck charging depot in the world. This is in Long Beach. And you know, the emissions around ports and drayage trucks are a huge health issue, and particularly for these disadvantaged communities have to live in close proximity. This is a big, big deal to decarbonize that sector. There's also some great technology coming that I would love to see get deployed here in Hawaii. This is a great company out of San Francisco called VoltPost, and they make basically a vandal-proof cylindrical cabinet that fixes around a lamppost. So most lampposts in the US on city streets were installed for high-pressure sodium, earlier lighting technology that's now all been replaced by LEDs, which are way more efficient. So you have a lot of surplus power capacity in the light post, and you have the structure there. They attach this thing, and then you can charge your car on it. And then in many cases, what they do, they work out a deal with the cities. They'll take like 40% of the charging revenues, and that's how it's paid for. We're also seeing, this is a great company out of San Diego called Beam Energy, and they make a EV charger that's not connected to the grid at all. It has a tracking solar array on the top, and there's energy storage underneath that, connected to an arm which connects to a steel ballast there, 12,000-pound ballast that says I'm plopped into a parking space. You don't need to permit, you don't need to trench, you don't need to interconnect, and you're going to have EV charging. So we're putting these in our state parks all over California. Yeah, we're also integrating, let's look at it, there you go. We're also integrating storage into EV charging itself. So this is a facility, a food delivery facility out of Gilroy, California, where the utility, PG&E, said, hey, it's going to take us 2.5 years to install the utility upgrade to be able to deliver sufficient power for the chargers. What they did was they just put in energy storage, and you can trickle charge it overnight, and they could do like 2.5 months. So it's a great success story. And we're seeing longer and longer range vehicles. So this is the Tesla electric semi that operates out of the Pepsi facility in Modesto. I got to drive one of these, fully loaded with junk food. Told me that the longest they've gone on a single charge is 585 miles. Okay, so one of the interesting things when I did this visit, I sat with a driver who'd been driving a truck, semi-truck in California for 30 years. And last year was his first driving all electric. And he told me something that really stuck with me. He said he's absolutely convinced that this is good for his health. It's good for his, he noticed less fatigue, less vibration and noise and pollution. And that was really good to realize. What's good for climate is good for health. We're also seeing some really cool things happening in these sectors. So this is a picture from Oakland, California. We just became the first city in North America to fully electrify all its school buses. 74 buses, 74 chargers. Yeah, 100% of the kids going to school on a school bus in Oakland today are going electric. It's also, to the best of my knowledge, the largest vehicle-to-grid project in the world. They're coming back. They have a lot of surplus capacity. The batteries connect in, feed power back into the grid, and get compensated. And some other incredible things. I took this picture in LA last month. This is the first electric armored car. We've got a great company out of Livermore called Monarch, which is doing all electric tractors. And then this is me on Tuesday driving the first all-electric trash car. So, I did want to drive to DC and take out the So in 2019, we hit peak gasoline consumption in California. We've been averaging going down about 1% every year as we're adding electric vehicles. So we're adding about 1,300 electric vehicles a day in California. And as I mentioned, about 180,000 EV chargers versus about 120,000 gasoline ones. Okay, lithium Valley talked about. One of the things as we wrap up, I just want to rebut one of the main critiques we've gotten when we really started moving aggressively on clean energy and climate solutions about 15 years ago. One of the main critiques we got was, hey, this is going to be terrible for your economy. We've heard that from a lot of red state governors, a lot of people throwing stones. Well, what actually happened during that time? We were the 10th largest economy. And since then, as we have decarbonized aggressively, we passed Russia, we passed Italy, we passed Brazil, we passed France, we passed the UK, and we just passed Japan to be the 4th largest economy in the world. So don't believe the hype. I love this picture. We were talking about this earlier today at a TV show. This is 1900 Fifth Avenue, in New York City, all horse and buggies and one car. And then 13 years later, 1913, same street, all cars and one horse and buggy, right? So the energy transition can happen faster than we realize. We're also pushing hard on rooftop solar, so we now require solar in all new homes, all new buildings, and all new schools. And then we adopted, it go every few years, we adopted last September one that is now driving electric heat pumps mainstream. So we've gone from basically about 1% of new construction being built all electric 5 or 6 years ago to about 80% today. Because of all this, we're ranking #1 in the US for energy efficiency, #1 for water efficiency. And as we think about electrification, you know, it is amazing the different areas that are electrified. Cynthia and I just installed we had one gas appliance left, which is our gas stove, and we just put in this stove, which is actually an electric induction made by a company called Copper, and they put a battery in the stove. So if there's ever a blackout, you can still cook and you can charge your phone or whatever from the stove. Street sweeping is going electric. We have police vehicles. South Pasadena became the first police vehicle fleet to go 100% electric last year. And even delivery trucks. This is in our neighborhood budget, rental car, and so forth. And then very exciting is what's happening in maritime electrification. Rapid electrification of our ports, Long Beach and San Diego, electric cranes. San Diego just took delivery of the first electric tugboat in the world, and we're now constructing the very first all battery electric ferries in North America. They're being built in Washington State now. We're paying for the charging infrastructure. I was really inspired when I went to Norway, which is really leading the world on electrification. They're 98% of new vehicles sold in Norway are electric, and they have 82 battery electric ferries. It takes 7 minutes. It's like a full-scale ferry, right? 7 minutes for the passengers to disembark and for the next group to get on. Ferry is an automatic docking arm, comes in, fully charges in 7 minutes, and goes out and does a 2-hour tour. And that's happening today. So we're going to make that happen in California. We just electrified from diesel to electric Caltrain last September, connecting Silicon Valley to San Francisco. And we actually have an electric aircraft industry. This is probably a $4 billion industry in California. Vertical takeoff and landing. These are for short hop flights, maybe 150 to 200 miles, Archer Aviation and Joby and others. But as we close, I wanted to just say, I think where we are with climate and the challenge ahead is very analogous to the story of smoking in the United States. And here's why. So both my grandfathers were in World War II, and every soldier in the war got 3 things every day. You got food, you got chocolate, and you got a pack of cigarettes. So a generation of American men came home as smokers. Smoking was totally mainstream in the US. Johnny Carson smoked on The Tonight Show, Fred Flintstone smoked. Doctors did ads for cigarettes. President Kennedy smoked, Marilyn Monroe smoked. Some people say they smoked together. And then, what happened? The science came out. Hey, smoking causes cancer, and secondhand smoke causes cancer. What was the response of the tobacco industry in the United States to that science? Okay, they went from manufacturing one product, cigarettes, to manufacturing 2 products. They manufactured cigarettes, and they manufactured doubt. They manufactured doubt. They put $100 million into junk science to distort this basic fact. They come with all these other crazy ideas for what could possibly be causing this epidemic of lung cancer. But what happened next, I think, is very hopeful, and it's very instructive, because it's really analogous to what we've seen with some of the junk science around climate, which is the truth got out there and it got accepted, and it led to a cascade of policies. So health warnings on cigarette packages, banning cigarette advertising from TV, increasing the cigarette tax, banning sales to minors, smoking on airplanes, bars and restaurants, and we went from half the country smoking down to 9%. So the world has a smoking problem, but there's a pathway to the other side of this. And so I want to just close with one final picture that gives me a lot of hope. Because I think a lot of us are here tonight because we hold in our hearts a dream to pass on a better future to the next generation, one we can feel proud of, where we're actually leaving things better. We're leaving things better. And this is a story, the Klamath River in California is an amazing story. It's led by the tribes. particularly the Yurok, but also the Hoopa and Karuk and many others. They have 4 dams on this river. They have totally disrupted the salmon run. And they advocated for over 25 years. And the dams just got taken down last year, and now the river is free flowing. And there's a big group of indigenous youth that did a kayak and rafting trip all the way down. And at the same time, the condor had gone extinct in that area from lead bullets 100 years ago. And so in the Yurok culture, the condor, which is the highest flying bird in the region, and it's a beautiful bird. It lived to 75 years old, 9.5 foot wingspan. In the Yurok culture, they're thought to convey wisdom to the people because they have a perspective, and because of the high flying bird, to be the medium for humanity's hopes to rise to the heavens. So you can imagine, the condor being absent, what that meant. And they did a breeding program, preserved the species, and then just 2 years ago, they reintroduced the condor. So the condor are now flying 6 birds a year. And so the salmon are running, the condor are flying, and I think we can all draw a lot of hope from that. Thank you guys so much.
So I took some notes, and I'm so sorry, Robert. I'm not gonna stick to the script because you know me. But I did take some notes. I think what's exciting is Hawaii, we were the first in the nation, right, to have a 100% renewable goal. And California shortly after adopted that as well. But in terms of learning from each other, I think there's so much to learn from. What would you say California has learned from Hawaii and vice versa?
Well, the law you just described, which was led by my good friend Senator Chris Lee, that's an audacious thing, okay? And, adopted at a time, 2015, a decade ago, we were not as far along on renewable price, on efficiencies and so on. But it does really expand people's sense of imagination. And one of the things that's powerful, I think, for an island state to do it is harder to do on an island. It's really hard. In California and the rest of the contiguous states in the US, you can rely on your neighbors, you can import power. You don't have that opportunity. You can't even bring in power from neighboring islands, right? So it did set the bar very high. It's like, wow, if we're gonna actually pass a law that directs that and creates that certainty in an environment like Hawaii, I think it got everybody's sights raised. And I just want to pay tribute to all the folks who led that. And we really keyed off of that momentum. I mean, really, we adopted our law in 2018, and it was pretty much verbatim, same date, 2045, and so forth. So it was an incredible feat.
Yeah. And written by Jeff Magdalena as well, the bill, right? And then, of course, done by Chris, too. So great to see. When you talk about, and I think that's a big way that Hawaii inspired California, but I think moving forward, we need to learn a lot from California, especially with the technology. But obviously, Hawaii's so different. You were talking about all of the, I wrote it here, the world's largest. It was the world's largest this, the world's largest that. We're a small island, right? We're a small island state. So we don't really have the opportunity to have the world's largest this and that. So in terms of what we can do, where do you think the biggest progress we can make is?
Well, you can be the world's first. And that is just as important. And I would just highlight, how much that matters. I was in Norway last summer, okay? So they're doing things there that I've never seen. They have all electric construction equipment, all electric bulldozers, all electric cranes, all electric dump trucks. I talked about the all electric ferries. And they're now, you go to downtown Oslo, walking around, it's quiet. All the vehicles are electric. And the fact that they've been able to do that, there's 4 million people in Norway, but it's really inspiring. And I think that's one of the opportunities to what Jeff was talking about at the beginning here, is just to model best practices and continue to push the envelope. People watch, and I think particularly now, in a climate where there's really a full-on sort of revenge and destruction tour happening from Washington, D.C., that can obscure the reality that most of the power and most of the policies that really matter for the energy transition are still made at the state level. And that is everything from interconnected standards, permits, tax credits, renewable portfolio standards, and so much else. And so we got to lean into that power and be bold. And I think the thing that excites me about the road ahead is that, while fossil fuels are a fully mature industry, okay, renewables are still getting cheaper and better and more efficient every year. And so the chance to achieve total market transformation is really exciting. And that story I just shared about going from a gigawatt every year for solar to a gigawatt every half day, we're not done with that, and when I come back and give my next talk here, it'll probably be 5 gigawatts a day. So that's exciting to me, is the chance to transform the market through scale.
And with that said, I mean, when you talk about transformation, do you feel that the journey to 100% renewable is with our current technology, or do you think it's with new technology that's yet to be?
Look, here's how I would say it. If you were to freeze entirely all technology development, okay, I believe we can get to 100% clean energy future just with what we have today. There are, a bunch of successful technologies that are still in the early stages, but we're doing long duration energy storage today, which is 100-hour battery storage. Most of the lithium batteries are just 4 hours. But the thing is, it's not frozen, and that technology is getting better. We have to continue to invest in research and development. We have a $150 million a year research and development program to keep pushing that. No, that is why I think there's a lot of reason for optimism. I'll say one other thing too, which is I think it's been very dismaying for me to see how politicized this space has become. We have to totally depoliticize clean energy infrastructure. It is just good for the country, it's good for the economy, it's good for the innovation sector, it's good for air quality, for climate, and it's also good for young people. I think when I look out, my wife and I have 2 young daughters, and so many folks coming out of high school and college are really wondering, what the hell am I going to do with my life? And these are industries that are incredibly exciting to work in and rewarding, and work that you can believe in. And so there's a lot of hope and excitement for the next generation within these solutions that we're lifting up.
And speaking of work that you can believe in, I think, we talk about California and Hawai'i learning from each other and having a lot of inspiration from each other, but what about the future of actually working together?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to be done there. I'm meeting tomorrow with all of the members of the Hawaii PUC, and had some good meetings today with Mark Glick. Thank you for that time. And I think these kind of exchanges, as well as between legislators, are super, super valuable. We're all in the West together, and there's a lot we can learn from each other, and that's what's exciting to me, is sharing best practices.
Yeah, and speaking of a lot that we can learn from each other, I think one of the exciting things that I saw in your presentation was about the PV mandates. And we have, we have the solar hot water mandates that we've had here, but in terms of something like more of the PV that you were saying, schools, et cetera, I think the biggest thing with that comes up is affordability. So how do you kind of tackle that and alleviate that and make that not an issue?
Yeah, it's a good question. There has been some adjustment to the net metering law in California, and that's been I'd say a bit of a bumpy road. So I think generally what I'd say is it's okay for policies to evolve and grow as conditions change. I think we do want to try to avoid abrupt changes. Just generally speaking, with the clean energy transition, the philosophy that we try to aspire, we don't always get there, but is really sustained, orderly development, where you create predictable long-term policies and create that stability. And that's the best way to drive costs down. Because if you think about it from the perspective of the innovators and the people making these technologies, they really need stability in order to invest and to innovate and to grow. And by the way, that is what happened for the fossil fuel industry. We've been subsidizing fossil fuels since 1926, when the oil depletion allowance was created, for 100 years. And by the way, those subsidies did not get canceled, okay? They're continuing on in perpetuity, right? What's just ended with solar and wind and the others, EV tax credits end at the end of September, heat pump tax credits end at the end of December. That has not been the case for fossils. So part of the reason that fossil fuels were able to get to their cost position, it was from that stability. So a lot of the state leadership that Hawaii and California and our sister states are exercising, I think, is really on clean energy, is really to make up for what we haven't had at the federal level, which is really long-term stable policies.
But again, as you mentioned, I mean, so much of that is in the power of states. And so I think that's why a lot of us are still so hopeful, because there's still so much that can be done, even during this time, during what I like to call a little speed bump that we're going through right now, right? I mean, and something else that's exciting that you guys have done, I don't know, I think, in terms of regulatory and permitting, I think that can be a big roadblock, but something that you guys have kind of expedited in a way. Do you think, in terms of permitting and regulatory, I guess, mandates, that's something that kind of needs a complete overhaul to make this happen?
Yeah. So raise your hand if you've read the book Abundance. Has anyone read that? I could tell you. Yeah. So I read it a month ago. I found it to be a kind of a really welcome kick in the pants to democratic governance about how do we get things that have to be built, how do we actually get it done? And there's a lot of stuff that does need to be constructed, everything from EV charging to energy storage. And we've added a lot, too much friction, I think, on a lot of these things. But there are some very hopeful stories. One of the things we pushed out just over the last 2 years is money to 347 different jurisdictions in California to do permitting over the internet for behind-the-meter solar and behind-the-meter storage. In many cases, these permits were taking 60 days to complete, and they were all done in paper. And now that's all over the internet, single day. And we've also done fast track permitting for utility scale. So we just did our first project under this new fast track permitting for what's the largest battery project in the world. It's called Darden. It's a $5 billion project, and that was under our new fast track utility scale permitting. So working on making that better too. Yeah.
So exciting. And all right, I was given a list of 2 pages of questions, and I'm really surprised to not see one that I really wanted to ask and that I was curious about. So curious minds, David, if you don't mind. When it comes to, I mean, we boast about it, right? We are the first state in the nation to create a 100% renewable energy goal. And yet, we are now considering using fossil fuels. Yet again, I think many know that LNG is being looked at, liquefied natural gas. What are your thoughts on that, to transitioning now, looking at a finite resource?
Yeah, so I've been learning a lot about this over the last few days. You know, I think the way I would think about it is, okay, what are the needs that you have to meet? Okay, which is grid reliability and decarbonization, and then what are the different options to reach those? And I can just simply share from our experience in California, the reason we're not investing in new fossil fuel infrastructure, and in fact we've been retiring about 5 gigawatts of gas capacity we've retired over the last 5-6 years, is because we're getting those needs met by clean resources, and in particular energy storage. What has happened with energy storage is that the energy density of the batteries has improved enormously, and then the costs, you know, really mirror what's happening in solar. So battery costs used to be about $1,000 a kilowatt hour, now down to about 80 and falling, and a lot more progress to come. And most importantly, the battery fleet that we have is performing really successfully, and it's come online incredibly quickly. So if we decided in this room today we want to build a new gas power plant pretty much anywhere in the continental United States, and I don't know what the timeline is for Hawaii, but in the continental US, 7 years is the minimum, okay? The minimum time. We built 16 gigs of storage in the last 6 years, and it's coming on very fast. So that's meeting our needs, and you know, we are enjoying, you know, I think a lot of public support for the clean energy story, and that's been really successful for us. So from my perspective, that's how to think about it, is can you meet the needs with clean resources, and you probably can do it faster, yeah.
And yeah, give them a round of applause. With that said, I feel like there's so much that needs to be done, and there are so many big power players in this room right now, when it comes to politics, when it comes to business, and so much more. I guess if you could talk to everyone here of what we can be doing, like what really needs to be done for Hawaii in terms of top priorities. What do you think we need to be changing right now?
You know, one thing I would, just going back to your last point about the exchange, I have found it, you know, hugely helpful to go visit best practice sites. I mean, the electrification work we're doing was heavily informed by my visits to Norway. And then in turn, seeing what other states are doing well in different processes, I think getting closer to what's happening in innovation, particularly around energy storage, is really important. To go actually see some of these sites, go talk to, we'd be happy to host any delegation that wants to come to our ISO Operations Control Center and learn how we're managing really intense fluctuations on the grid. We have fluctuations, within a day of 20 gigawatts, and we're handling that with storage really successfully and with demand response. And virtual power plants, and I know, Walker with Sunrun, has been standing up this virtual power plant. So I think more of those technology exchanges and best practices is a good thing, particularly now. And we want to, I think the field is developing so quickly. Sometimes we miss some really important developments that then can inform sound policymaking. So I think a lot more on the exchanges is valuable. Yep.
And speaking of valuable, I feel like social norms are so valuable when it comes to the mindset around clean energy and electric vehicles. When you're talking about the smoking analogy, I thought that was really, I feel like on the nose, because I feel like now too, if there's like a man, I don't want to date a guy with a big truck, right? Isn't that like you have a Tesla, I'm like, well, now I'm like that. But if you have an EV, it's like, oh, who cares, right? But I feel social norms.
I see some guys taking notes here at the back.
Social norms, though, really can make a big impact. So, and can change things quickly. So how do we shift that mindset?
Yeah, so I'm really glad you asked. She's hysterical, by the way. I love it. So we have launched a $65 million campaign to do a non-branded electric vehicle. It's called electricforall.org. We did a big ad with Arnold Schwarzenegger, basically just encouraging people to go electric and to kind of socialize this vision, because it does need the message to get out. And it's funny, when you think about electric vehicles, there's a really interesting thought experiment that this writer in England, Rory Sutherland, proposed, which I really like. It's like, all right, if you just imagine that we're already there. So society is 100% electric, there's fast charging everywhere, everyone's driving an electric vehicle, and then some automotive engineer were to come up with an idea. Hey, I have a great idea. Let's take a combustible fuel and let's create an internal combustion engine and have multiple controlled explosions. But the torque's not going to be good enough, so you have to have a gearbox. That's going to require oil, and it's going to be great. And then you kind of ask, okay, well, is the driving experience better? No, it doesn't accelerate as good. Is it quieter? No, much noisier. Is it cleaner? No, much dirtier. Is it cheaper? No, it's about twice as expensive per mile. Is it simpler? No, there's like 250 moving parts compared to 7 for electric. So it's like, okay, what's better about it? You can actually fuel faster, but can you fuel at home? No. So so really the issue is like the fast charging, and that is getting resolved. Okay, so CATL in China just came out with the charging technology, 330 miles of charge in 5 minutes. BYD, 250 miles of charge in 5 minutes. They have surpassed the US. Tesla is at 200 miles of charge in 15 minutes. Chinese companies don't want to manufacture in North America because they're worried we're going to steal their tech. Okay, hasn't happened. And so, but I mean, the reality is like fast charging can be resolved. So I think we have to get the word out about these things much better. But one of the things I'll say as we wrap here is like, there is a sort of democratization of energy that happens when you go to clean technology, because you can't put a coal power plant on your house, but you can put solar, and you can get an electric vehicle. So there are these choices where you get to vote, right, essentially by how you live and what you buy. And I think we got to shine a light on the good options that are out there.
Definitely. Yes, give thanks for that. That's really good. And I see the timer countdown, and I'm so annoyed by that, because I feel like you and I can just keep chatting for forever and ever, and people are so interested. I think for these types of conversations, I typically ask, especially when we're talking about clean energy, renewables, and climate in general, I like to ask, what are your hopes for the future? I think, or why does this matter, right? And I think all of us in the room kind of know why this matters. That's why we're all here. We do really care. This is something that everyone should be passionate about. I'm gonna ask you something a little bit different though, but still to kind of summarize. You said you want 100% clean energy for 100% of the people. But how do we get there? What do you think we need to be doing right now?
Well, I think it's just keeping to this philosophy of sustained orderly development, which basically means to get a little bit better every year and a little bit further along every year and keep to these long-term stable policies. And then some more innovative thinking about barrier busting, some of the things around permitting. I know it can be slow to build this stuff, but that too can be made better. So.
Okay, and I know I sort of had just like rephrased another question that I had asked too, but I just think that's really important of like, what do we actually need to be doing right now? And then what does your ideal clean energy future look like?
Well, I want to say just one word too about our society, because that's also something I hope we can do some mending. I have seen, a loss of some of the just basic civic respect for one another. I think Hawaii is a really special place in that way, because I think what I've seen is people disagree, but as intense as those things may feel here, relative to the rest of the country, I think you're doing really well on being able to still respect one another. And I think we got to get back to that as a country, and see the humanity in everybody, even people we may disagree with vigorously, as we go forward and build this clean energy future forever, for everyone. Because actually the future we're building, there's only one common destiny. We have one shared destiny. There's not multiple destinies, there's one destiny. And we're all in the same boat. It's a small boat at the end of the day. So I hope that we can find ways to kind of get through some of this, unfortunately, very, very heated rhetoric and division as we go forward and build this future together.
Beautiful. David Hochschild. Yeah, no, thank you. That was fantastic.
First, I love the foreign mobility piece you had on the slide, and I just want to flag that Matt, who's the CEO, was a UH pitcher, so that's another thing that was important in to California, and I hope that Dre is here, that we get some drayage in our port soon too. I wanted to ask, I think because of a lot of different reasons around land constraints and a bunch of other issues here in Hawaii, families have seen the pressures in some cases of renewable energy, but they haven't seen the benefits in their household and in costs, especially working families. And so, can you tell us, you talked a lot about like the grid scale projects and fabulous but not kills many birds. Can you talk about what you're doing specifically in California to get into low and moderate income households to deliver cost savings so that they see climate progress as a pocketbook win and not just a sort of clean air win?
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's a great question. I really appreciate that. So we're focused on deploying this stuff in low-income and disadvantaged communities first. So 60%, you guys remember me? 60% of our charging infrastructure is going into low-income disadvantaged communities. About 75% of our clean energy research and development projects, these are cutting-edge energy storage technologies, so on, going into low-income and disadvantaged communities. We have 109 federally recognized Native American tribes in California, about 20% of the total number of tribes in the US. And we have funded $130 million for 35 tribal energy sovereignty projects. These are solar battery microgrids. Many of our tribes are losing power as much as 10 times a year. And then we have programs like the HERO program that are 100% focused on low income for heat pump rebates and so forth. And then in addition to that, we have what's called the CARE program, which is a pretty substantial 35% discount on electric rates for low income.
Thanks for that question, Josh. All right, next up we have Chip Fletcher.
This is fantastic. What a great discussion. Thank you, Kelly and David. And David, thank you for coming to Hawaii. You're a wonderful resource, and I hope we bring you back frequently. On a global scale and on a national scale, the major barrier is that as we deploy clean energy, we are also demanding more energy. And the tools at hand that are easiest to use are the fossil fuel tools. And so if you look at a graph, whether it's global or national, the rise in clean energy is matched by a rise in dirty energy. And so many experts are asking now, how do we reduce our demand for energy as a solution? And is this, I'd like you to discuss this a little bit, and is this a topic that California is wrestling with?
Yeah, so that's another great question. So that's true generally, but not for the electric grid. We are retiring fossil. We've retired about 5 gigs of natural gas capacity, and we're not adding new capacity on the grid. But looking ahead, data centers through AI are expected to constitute as much as half of global energy demand by mid-century. Now, unless there's quantum computing happens, and that could significantly reduce that. But what has to happen nationally, we have to be super aggressive on energy efficiency. And this is another unfortunate thing with the Trump administration. They've been going backwards on that. We are still fully committed to aggressive energy efficiency standards. That matters a great deal. So things like lighting, all right? We did the standard to ban the incandescent light bulb. That took like 10 years of work. But now, LED lights consume 80% less electricity than incandescents. And we got the color edition to match. So there's a lot you can do through those standards, both in new construction to make sure that new homes are super efficient, and for appliances. And one thing that is a benefit in California, we are a big state, so we have 40 million citizens. So when we do a standard, I'll tell you a great story. We did a standard for computers. My advisor, Ken Ryder, led this. The computer industry said, "Oh, we can't build a computer that big."
Swap it.
Yeah, swap it. Can't build a computer that big or that efficient. So Ken bought several computers, took the most efficient parts from each one, and rebuilt the most efficient computer, and went back and said, "Yes, you can," and that we made our standard. We did the same thing with televisions, cut the energy use in half. But what happens when you have 40 million people in the market where we mandate that, so you can't sell your TV or your computer into our market without that, the industry typically does not want to run one manufacturing line for California and one for the rest of North America, so it ends up being a de facto standard. And the same thing with plug-in chargers. So we had a standard for your cell phone or your electric razor, where up until a few years ago, it would be plugged into the wall. After the device is fully charged, it continues to use a little bit of power, called the vampire load. Why? Because there's a 25-cent shutoff diode that the manufacturer is electing not to install because they don't care, they don't pay the energy bill. We do. So he said, no, you can't sell that in California. And so that saved $300 million for ratepayers. But this kind of thing we really need at the White House and in the Department of Energy leadership that gets that, because that's a really important feature of how we get to your question.
Thanks for that question, Chip.
Hi, I'm Dave Mullins. Thank you so much for coming. This is amazing. We're also the first state in the nation to declare a climate emergency. And if more states did that, that would put pressure on all the governments to act more quickly. Your state of California is moving away from natural gas. You banned heaters, water heaters, furnaces, and why? I mean, what was the history of that, and why are you moving away from natural gas?
Well, so I think with natural gas, it's true that there are fewer particulate emissions than, for example, combusting gasoline or oil. But there's a lot of climate emissions, and it's not just in the combustion when you have a water heater or so forth. But actually there's 2 million wellheads in the United States, and there are a lot of leaks in the system. And methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. And so it's not actually accurate to only look at the emission of when you have a water heater or a stove, okay? That's part of the story. And that may be somewhat better than burning gasoline, but it's not the entire story. And so we're really supportive of moving entirely to clean solutions. And I think one thing that's important to note is that the remedies here are now ready. Okay, so electric heat pump technology works. You know, we are now in an all-electric house. We got rid of our gas water here, we got rid of our gas furnace, and you know, the water's still hot, the heater still works, and we're now cooking on all electric. You know, that was harder to do some years ago, but now, you know, the companies have the solutions. So, you know, I will say, you know, gas is a very cheap resource, and the system is there. But there are also risks with that. We had a gas pipeline explosion in California that killed 8 people, the San Bruno pipeline explosion. We had a natural gas power plant in Hayward blow up and send chunks of metal 1,200 feet through community center kitchens. I went and saw that. I mean, there's risks with that as well. And I mean, there's risks across the energy space. But you know, our decision, you know, collectively, the state is to move to clean solutions.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's really inspiring to see what California is doing. You talked a little bit earlier in response to Kelly's question about investing in LNG for Hawaii, which is top of mind for many people who've been working in the clean energy space in the state for over a decade. You talked about how investing in LNG and building LNG power plants could take 7 years at minimum. Right now it's 2025. Things take a while to develop in Hawaii, so it could be 2035 before we see our first LNG plant go in. And I want to talk about the flip side of what you mentioned. In addition to, on the other hand, like we could get there faster with clean energy, but on the flip side of that, what are the opportunity costs of investing in LNG at this critical juncture in our clean energy transformation when the first plant wouldn't go in until 10 years before we're supposed to be 100% free of fossil fuels?
Yeah, well, I think, look, and I just want to say, this is a decision you as a state and all of the folks that you work with are going to make and work through, and I know it's contested and I know it's complicated, and I don't have all the expertise on the specifics of the Hawaii situation. What I can share is we have looked at this really closely in California, and we put some of our best people, our best teams on it, and the reason we're not investing in new fossil capacity is multifaceted, but one feature that I didn't mention yet is really about independence, okay? Today in California, we import almost 90% of the natural gas that we consume. So we're sending money out of the state economy every time we turn on a gas device. And that in itself is not sound policy. So with these clean assets, yeah, you do pay when you install it, but then once you have solar, sunlight is free, wind is free, and you're not vulnerable to either fluctuations in the market or some bad actor deliberately raising prices. And so there's a lot of value, and I think a high premium we place on energy independence, as well as reducing our vulnerability. But even absent those things, I mean, I just think the technology is better. And what we're seeing out of the battery fleet in California, which is colossal. Just the battery fleet alone in California is like 16 times the peak load in Oahu, right? So, and it's working really well. So if I had a different experience with the battery fleet, maybe we would be a little more hesitant, but it's just been performing incredibly well. And so that's kind of why we landed where we did on that decision.
Okay, this one, first of all, I have 2 questions. The first one is just a joke. But Kelly, if the guy bought the Tesla before Elon went crazy, does that change the equation at all?
So don't ask when I got mine.
Okay, thank you. Very cool. I'm super inspired. I love thinking that the 3 of the 4 biggest global economies in the world are doing kind of amazing things. Environmentalists used to be able to just like protest a pipeline or something like that, but now it's like we have such better solutions. I looked up some stats. 2015, the US did 7 gigawatts of solar in 1 year. In China, in May, they did 93 gigawatts. And they sold 1 million BYD Dolphins in 2 years. This is a $10,000 EV with a 190-mile range. They sold 1 million of those in the last 2 years. So this news is amazing, and I think we need to spread this kind of stuff because people get kind of depressed when they see stuff like chasing coral and stuff like that. It sucks and whatever. Like, yeah, we need some gloom and doom to wake people up, but this news is super important. How do we follow California's incredible progress on this stuff?
Good question. Yeah, maybe we get Kelly to do a roadshow through California. That's really
Empowered on the road. Let's go,
let's
Jeff.
go hit the road. No, we are trying to do a better job of that. We just worked with the Governor Newsom on an op-ed, which just ran in the Wall Street Journal about us getting to 2/3 clean energy on the grid. And we need to do more of that because there is a lot of really great news to share, and I appreciate you raising that point. And just to highlight, China is now making the majority of their vehicles electric, over 50%. And making colossal progress on cost reduction. And so, I really believe electric is going to win in really every segment. It's really a question of timing. But I do want to pay tribute. China's done an incredible job on scale. I've been to a bunch of those factories. And I will express some jealousy, actually, in the sense that, they have a bold industrial policy, and they're not debating it, they're not shooting themselves in the foot, they're not killing their own domestic clean energy industries, they're just scaling it. And it's making them much more competitive, and it's painful for me, to just having been in this field for 25 years, when I see China develop a fast charger 330 miles in 5 minutes, and scale electric vehicles. I mean, these are technologies that were invented here,
Right.
and they're being perfected and scaled there. And so I'm glad they're doing that. I wish them well. It's more just on us. I wish we'd get our act together nationally and focus on doing what we need to do. But right now, we can do that at the state level, and that's our job. And we do that well, and I think the winds in this country are going to change. They are going to change, and we have to be ready, and we got to just keep pushing, and then we'll have a chance to scale it nationally when the time's right.
And be ready to take advantage of that wind energy.
We do have time for just one last question.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your 11,000 points of inspiration. Just being in this room full of titans and inspiration and innovators here in Hawaii, I guess I want to get personal and find out day to day, with the whiplash that the federal government is giving us with, the attacks on renewable energy, wind, EVs. What are your personal bright spots that you walk toward? I know sometimes you have to take a 30-degree step at a different angle to look at something just to see the light coming in. But what was some recent, like, okay, you chicken scam, right? Great. What made you tear up?
Oh, wow, what a great question. Wow. You should come on the road too. We'll do this. I love that question. I feel inexplicably optimistic, actually. I just do. It's more just like a knowing kind of in my soul that we are going to make it through this. And I'm fortunate to have married someone who's like way more wise than me. And so Cynthia will like throw me down these little morsels of wisdom, and I kind of chew on them during the week. But one of the things that she has been talking about as we've been reflecting on this time is just the ability to draw on the wisdom and the courage of our ancestors. And I think about my own, and so I'm German Jewish on my father's side. I have relatives who were in Auschwitz and survived Auschwitz, And I'll just tell you one story. So my cousin Jerry was 16 when he was sent to Auschwitz with his father. And German Jews in World War I were actually allowed to be in the German military and were allowed to be officers. So my cousin Jerry, his father was an officer in the German military in World War I, and then was a prisoner in Auschwitz. And they get into the prison, and after there a little while, he spots a guard who served under him as a soldier in the army in World War I, right? And this guard spotted him and said, I'm going to do everything I can to save your life. And the guy hid food, and he had newspapers, so they could even follow the course of the war. And my cousin survived because of that. So that has made me think a lot about just the power
of human kindness and even like, good people trapped in bad systems, and just the power to like persevere through the worst moments. And so I draw on that, and that has helped keep me going. But thank you for the questions.